The story begins in a small town nestled on the edge of a dense forest. Life was moving at its usual pace. People were busy with their daily routines, unaware that something unexpected was about to disrupt their peaceful world. A boy was riding his bike through the forest path when suddenly he got trapped in a dangerous snare. Later that night, we see a house where someone was quietly moving around inside. The family, unaware of this intruder, was fast asleep. But who was this stranger, and what was their purpose? The next morning, we meet Jackie Harper, the lady of the house, lost in deep thought. Her son Connor and her husband Greg Harper were also there. Lately, things weren't going well in their family. Connor had been suspicious of his mom as she was constantly on the phone, talking to someone unknown. As Greg woke up and walked upstairs, his eyes landed on a wall frame. It was missing a photo. He immediately understood what was going on. A little later, Jackie called Greg down for breakfast, but she left the house right after cooking. Annoyed and frustrated, Greg threw his phone at the window in anger, shattering the glass. As he sat there, regretting his actions, his eyes shifted to a mug sitting on the roof. When he checked inside, he found burned cigarette butts. He suspected it was Connor's doing and walked away, lost in thought. Meanwhile, we learned that Connor's mom, Jackie, was a doctor. She had also been taking some kind of medication lately. On the other hand, her husband, Greg, was a police officer. He had recently been assigned a missing child case. Justice Bitter, a 10-year-old boy. Justice was last seen at 9 a.m. wearing a green t-shirt. Despite thorough investigation, only his bike was found. There was no sign of him. The search was still on, with every possible lead being explored. On the other hand, Dr. Jackie reached home during lunchtime, carrying flowers for someone. Just then, she heard footsteps on the roof. She thought Connor might have come home early from school. But it turned out to be a carpenter who had come to fix the window. When Jackie asked him, he said he got a call from her husband. That confused Jackie. She asked the next question, "Who let you in?" As the carpenter was leaving, he replied, "Your daughter did." But Jackie didn't have a daughter. So what was going on? Meanwhile, after questioning the neighbors and doing some investigation, the police found a piece of evidence, a green-colored knife. Seeing it left them completely shocked. 15 years ago, 6 boys had gone missing from this same area, and their bodies were found buried with a green knife. That case was never solved, which meant whoever did it was back again. Later that night, Jackie and Connor were having dinner together. In the middle of their conversation, Jackie casually asked if a carpenter had come during the day. Connor suddenly got furious and snapped, "Is he the same guy you talked to on the phone? You cheated on Dad, and that's not okay." Jackie sat there, frozen, listening to his words. She had no idea how to handle her family anymore, when suddenly, the TV turned on by itself. The news was reporting another missing boy, the second minor to disappear within a month. Jackie quickly turned off the TV, but as soon as she turned around, it switched back on. Just then, Greg returned home from a duty. The moment he walked in, Jackie asked him about the carpenter. Greg had indeed called him to fix the window. Greg asked what was going on. That's when Jackie told him that all the silverware from their kitchen was missing. When they asked the carpenter who let him in, he had mentioned a girl. It sounded strange, but Greg refused to believe that a carpenter would steal their silverware. Well, Greg had his own things going on. As he was heading upstairs, he noticed that another photo was missing from the wall frame. And then, something even stranger happened. Greg followed his pet rat to a corner of the house, but the moment he stepped inside, someone locked the door from the outside. He started banging on it, yelling. He thought it must be Connor. Jackie heard his voice and quickly opened the door, but there was no way to tell who had locked him in. The next morning, like every other day, Greg went to work and got busy investigating the missing boy's case. Meanwhile, Jackie's lover, Todd, showed up at the house. Jackie met him and made it clear that they couldn't continue this relationship. He needed to understand that. But Todd wasn't ready to accept it. And just then, something fell on his head, splitting it open. Since Connor was home, Jackie quickly dragged Todd down to the basement and somehow managed to stop the bleeding. She reassured him that she'd take him to the hospital right after dropping Connor off at school. Meanwhile, Connor felt like someone was in the house. He started looking around, trying to find out what was going on. Just then, Jackie's phone rang. It was a call from Todd's phone. That meant Todd had left his phone somewhere inside the house when he walked in. Maybe it was Connor calling Jackie from Todd's phone. Maybe it was Connor who had hit Todd. Jackie rushed upstairs to check, but Connor acted like he had no idea what she was talking about. Whatever the case was, Jackie got in the car with Connor and drove off to drop him at school. But as soon as she left, someone struck Todd on the head, hard. A while later, we see Greg back at the forest road where the missing boys were last seen. There, he found a rope tied to a tree, clear evidence that someone had set a trap to capture that kid. And just like before, there was a green knife left behind, possibly to mislead the cops. When Jackie got back home, she was shocked to see Todd lying on the floor. The moment Greg arrived, she told him everything. She was scared. What if Connor had killed Todd? His cold attitude toward her affair was no secret. If he got caught, even Greg wouldn't be able to save him. So they decided to keep the murder a secret. They took Todd's body to the woods to get rid of it. Meanwhile, the entire town was desperately searching for the second missing boy. Because of this, Greg had to go deep into the forest. Once they reached a secluded spot, they got to work, burying the body. Meanwhile, back home, Connor was playing video games alone. That's when he heard a strange noise. Turns out, someone had stuffed spoons and forks inside the washing machine. Jackie felt extremely guilty about everything that had happened today. She had gone behind the house to end things with Todd and fix her mistake. And that's when it all went wrong. Hearing this, Greg finally pulled her into a hug and forgave her. On the other hand, Connor heard about phrogging from a friend. When he searched for phrogging videos online, he was shocked. Connor was so focused on the footage that he didn't even realize. A masked man was standing right behind him. Sometime later, when his parents returned home, Jackie let out a scream. Greg rushed upstairs and found Connor tied up, barely conscious, and right beside him, a green knife. You already know what that means. Greg wasted no time. He rushed Connor to the hospital, grabbed his gun, and started searching for the intruder. Meanwhile, at the police station, an anonymous caller reported seeing the kidnapper. They needed to move fast, but Officer Greg wasn't answering his phone. Detective Spitsky said he'd pick Greg up from his house. Back at Greg's house, he was checking every corner of the house. Suddenly, music started playing by itself. That meant, whoever it was, they were messing with him. And the next second, the intruder attacked. The story now jumps 1 week back. Outside Greg's house, we see a girl watching him closely. As soon as he got in his car and left for work, she rushed inside before the garage shutter closed. She wasn't alone. A guy was with her, filming everything. The moment they stepped in, they were stunned by the luxury. It was clear, money really could buy anything. The house was packed with expensive stuff. Upstairs, they found a guest room, a perfect hiding spot. That's when the girl turned toward the camera and revealed she was here to make a documentary on phrogging. For those who don't know, phrogging is a trend where people secretly live in someone else's home without them knowing. Her name was Mindy, and the guy with her was Alec. This was Alec's first time, but Mindy was an expert. After exploring the house, they found a small room next to the bedroom and decided to sleep there. Around 2 a.m., Mindy woke up, which meant the family was home now. Meanwhile, Alec wasn't even hiding. He had climbed onto the roof to smoke a cigarette. Mindy rushed over to him, whispering, "You can't just step out whenever you feel like it. If you get caught, we're screwed." Alec just shrugged. "I was bored, just killing time." After that, they went back to sleep. But Alec had other plans. He secretly turned on his camera and started wandering around the house. As we saw earlier, he was the one who removed the photos from the wall frames. While they were chatting, suddenly, a window shattered. Before they could process what was happening, they heard footsteps, so they hid immediately. It was Greg. He had found the cigarette butts on the roof. Later that afternoon, when no one was home, Alec was busy taking down more photos. Meanwhile, Mindy had gone down to the basement, looking for another hiding spot. But Alec, he was too busy messing with the family. He even downloaded an app to control the TV remotely. And then, the carpenter knocked on the door. Mindy was standing right in front of him, nowhere to hide. So, she invited him inside. Inside the bathroom, Alec found some sleeping pills. He took one and secretly dropped it into Mindy's water bottle. Just then, Jackie showed up, forcing them to hide. That's when they heard about another guy, someone from this very town. While chatting, Alec casually handed Jackie the water bottle. She drank it and soon fell into a deep sleep. That's when Alec started messing around. He sat there, turning the TV on and off. Meanwhile, Greg was staring at the photo gallery, looking uneasy. Alec was the one who let their pet rat loose and locked Greg inside the room. And before Jackie could return, he had already hidden under the bed. But his pranks didn't stop there. He even started pulling their blankets at night. Then, he did something that was hard to believe. The next morning, he was hanging out on the rooftop when, by accident, a mug slipped from his hand and hit Todd's head. Mindy freaked out and panicked, saying, "We need to leave right now. We can't mess with them. They'll call the cops for sure." But Alec was actually enjoying all of this. He smirked and said, "If you want to leave, go ahead." Mindy bringing him here was the biggest mistake. Just then, they heard someone approaching and quickly hid. It was Connor. He must have heard something. At this point, getting out of the house was the smartest option. Alec agreed, but their bag was in the basement. Alec had seen Todd drop his phone, and that gave him an idea. They could use it as a distraction. That meant Alec was the one who used Todd's phone to call Jackie. The moment Jackie left to drop Connor off at school, they sneaked into the basement. But they had no clue that someone else was already down there. Mindy quietly hid in a corner. And that's when it happened. Someone killed Todd. And guess what? It wasn't just anyone. It was Greg. He killed Todd because Todd was having an affair with his wife. Then Greg stuffed the murder weapon into a bag and hid it in the car. He had to be careful because Detective Spitsky was outside waiting for him. Turns out Greg had come home to grab a file. And from there, he headed straight to the place where Justice Bitter had disappeared, just like we had seen before. Mindy was completely devastated. Just as she was about to grab the bag and leave, Jackie barged in. She quickly took stock of the situation and called Greg. Mindy was still stuck there, and Alec, on the other hand, was having his own fun. Despite everything that was going on, he just couldn't resist his mischief. While Greg and Jackie went out to dispose of the body, Alec was busy tying up Connor after knocking him unconscious. Watching this, even Mindy started feeling scared of him. She tried to run, but in the process, she hit her head against the wall and passed out. Alec then put Connor in the bathtub and placed a green knife nearby. He quickly packed up his things and was about to put Mindy in the car when Greg and Jackie returned after getting rid of the body. Alec was now trapped inside the house. Suddenly, Jackie screamed when she saw Connor. After sending Connor to the hospital, he drove off in a car with Mindy inside. Alec was left speechless, unsure of what to do next. Meanwhile, Mindy started regaining consciousness. She reached into her bag, trying to pull out a bat for self-defense. But what she saw inside left her stunned. It was the jersey of Justice Bitter, the missing boy. Did this mean Officer Gregg was behind the kidnappings? One thing was clear. Mindy was in deep trouble. The car stopped deep inside a forest. Seizing the moment, Mindy got out and immediately called the police. She told them she was with the kidnapper, but had no idea where she was. The officer on the line told her not to hang up and that they would track her via GPS. But before they could, the call got disconnected due to a network issue. Mindy had barely taken a few steps when she spotted an old caravan. Curious, she stepped inside, but the sight before her made her freeze. 2 missing kids were locked up inside, crying for help. Before she could react, Gregg grabbed her too. He knocked her out and was just about to put her in the car when his eyes landed on a camera. He played the recorded footage, and in an instant, Mindy and Alec's truth was right in front of him. Detective Spitsky had already received the news and was on his way to pick up Gregg. Meanwhile, Gregg took Mindy back to his house, where Alec was hiding, waiting for his return. The moment Alec saw them, he realized Gregg had found out about Mindy. She was unconscious, and Gregg was pulling her out of the car to take her inside. Alec quickly looked around for a weapon, something he could use to save Mindy. Gregg brought Mindy back to consciousness. She started begging for mercy, pleading for her life. But Gregg, cold and merciless, shot her without hesitation. By then, Alec had found an axe. After shooting Mindy, Gregg fired 2 shots into the wall with another revolver, wiped his fingerprints off it, and placed it in Mindy's hands. Now, it was Alec's turn. Gregg started searching for him, while Alec, having seen what Gregg did to Mindy, had already decided to kill him. Holding the axe tightly, he moved stealthily, waiting for the right moment. The second Gregg came into sight, Alec swung the axe at him. But Gregg was already on guard and dodged the attack just in time. A brutal fight broke out between them, punches were thrown, bodies slammed against the walls, and the struggle intensified. Eventually, Gregg managed to overpower Alec and beat him unconscious. Or at least that's what he thought. Gregg then stabbed himself in the shoulder, setting up the perfect scene to frame Alec. But Alec wasn't actually unconscious. He had only been faking it. And now he had Gregg's revolver in his hands. Aiming it straight at him, Alec said, "I know who you are. You're the one who's been making kids disappear from this town. 15 years ago, I was supposed to be one of them, but I escaped." Gregg smirked. "Not this time. I've planned everything. You and your friend are the ones who take kids. You kidnapped that officer's child just to scare him off this case. He was your next victim. But he caught you red-handed." Alec tightened his grip on the trigger. "You're not walking away from this," he said. Gregg started begging. "It's not my fault. Something happened to me when I was a kid. It messed me up." But Alec didn't care. He shot Gregg dead, ending it right there. By then, Detective Spitsky had reached Gregg's house. The moment he saw Gregg's body on the floor, he fired at Alec, hitting him in the shoulder. Alec, struggling to stay on his feet, managed to tell them everything, the whole truth. That Gregg, the officer they trusted, was the real monster. That his hideout was deep in the woods. And finally, those 2 missing kids were rescued. Hours later, Jackie came home, only to find out the whole truth about Gregg